Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Game of Thrones podcast. I'm your host, Carmine of Red Team Review, and I'm joined here once again by Preston Jacobs. As always, we are available on SoundCloud and iTunes, so consider joining us on those platforms. And if you do, please leave us a review. It'll help out a lot. Also, leave your comments down below. We may cover them in the next episode. Sorry for the quick intro. Preston, the fans want to know.
Yeah.
Did we watch the leaks? And the answer to that is no, we didn't. Telemundo sent us an early review copy, as always, so shout out to them.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. So we saw it early, of course, like everybody else. And we wanted to get on top of this real quick. You just finished like an hour ago?
If not less, probably 20 minutes ago. So these are my first thoughts. Often in my first thoughts, I get a few things wrong. So just like I see something on screen that I misinterpret. But so forgive us if we get that wrong. If we get a few things here and there. But
lots to cover.
This is our first. Yeah, this is our first thoughts. A lot to cover.
So we were just talking about it before we record.
Did you want to jump to the ending, or do you want to go chronologically through?
Let's try to go chronologically because, like I was telling you before we started, so there was many leaks on various subreddits, Facebook groups, and forums all over the place. Some of them had things that were correct. Some of them had a lot of things that were wrong. There was this one guy who had this one thing out, and clearly he had seen some rough cut of the episodes before they even came out, I think before even the trailers were out. And he got a lot of this stuff right, but some people were saying, you got this wrong, this didn't happen. And I think it did, but they just chose to cut it out. Once again,
these are like those leaks of do you remember when the leaks happened? But one of the things they listed was that Cersei had a miscarriage.
Right.
And that was never shown in season 8. She never had a miscarriage, and she died pregnant. So I mean it could be an actual scene that was later cut, because I think there was a lot cut from what you told me.
Well, one of the things that was cut was that Daemon has brand new armor that we never get to see. We actually see him like ready for battle in this new armor. It's a variation of the armor we see in episode 1, but it apparently looks even more badass. There's also some weird editing choices that even I noticed in this episode. So according to the leaks, the scene in this episode where Daemon goes to the beach and he's very distraught and he's having like an emotional moment, this happens concurrently with Rhaenyra bearing her child. Apparently, and this did feel weird when I did see it, apparently Daemon is at the beach not emotional over the death of his child, but because he just heard about the prophecy, and he's just letting out a lot of emotion on this beach that no one ever told him about this threat in the north.
Yeah. I want to talk about the prophecy thing for a second.
Sure.
And this is my and you're going to hear me be a broken record here. And this is somewhat the case within an episode, but it's especially the case between episodes, is that they will have great scenes and they will plan great scenes, but the scenes are not consistent with previous episodes, making the whole story kind of disjointed. And I think the prophecy is a situation where we had already established a scene of Daemon being in Pentos and spending what his wife says is 10 years like researching prophecies and histories. Okay. And then to have in this scene him say prophecy doesn't make any difference, dragons make a difference. Now, on its own, if you didn't have that previous scene and you had like Daemon saying prophecies don't make a difference, like dragons make a difference, that's a pretty cool line. I understand the thematic juxtaposition of like fate versus free will, like that's a cool scene by itself. But the problem is that you already had this cool scene of him being a researcher for 10 years, going into his history and prophecy and everything before. So when you look at the Daemon character in the series, he's inconsistent. And there's a bazillion of these examples. I think Aemond is the primary example when you watch this episode and you're like, this is a completely different character from the Aemond I just fucking saw last episode. Like you have these cool scenes by themselves, but they don't connect to the stuff that was established before. I feel like it's almost like a Michael Bay movie where like if you take those 10 seconds and you slow them down and you can say, oh, that's a really beautiful shot. But then you throw it all together into a movie and it's a big jumbled mess because you can't have every scene be cool. Like you can't have maximum awesomeness in every moment because you have to have consistency, and there needs to be build up and all sorts of things like that. And so I'm watching a Daemon that's not consistent with previous Daemons. Like every episode we're getting a different Daemon.
Well, to play devil's advocate, it's been 6 years since episodes 7 to 8, and you can grow as a person in that time.
One can. I'm not saying that logically speaking, one can't be a completely different person, but narratively speaking, you need to show a character change.
So what is your complaint here specifically? You're complaining here that Daemon was obsessed with prophecy and now he's
not. Now he's completely come around off screen to be a free will person. And it's not like it takes much. You just need one scene where somebody mentions to him prophecy and he's like, I spent many years researching prophecy, but then I learned. And then you explain it, and all it takes is one scene. But you narratively need to establish that shift. I mean, one can take any story and make that argument, like, oh, people change. Okay, well, I can have any story and be like that. Like, let's say I establish that a character is a murderer, and then in the next scene he's super kind and caring, and you're like, well, there was one day between the scenes, and in between that scene, he got a phone call and found out that his mother died, and it made him re-examine his life, and he had a crisis, and he came around and wanted to be a good person. And you're, oh, really? That happened off screen between scenes? Like, you can always make that argument that people change. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, people change. But narratively speaking, we're telling a story. You need that beat. You need to tell me that something happened.
Or show us,
show us that something happened. I can have one scene where how about two guys are fighting with swords, and clearly both guys do not have any other weapons. And then they're scrambling around, and then all of a sudden a guy pulls out a gun and shoots the other guy. You're like, oh, well, where'd that gun come from? You can say, well, off screen, he got up, ran over to another room, grabbed a gun, ran back in. We just didn't see it. Well, I suppose, but you're telling a story on screen. You can't just have that happen, right? You can't just make the argument that people change. Narratively speaking, you need to show the change. So it's just so weird because they had established that Daemon really cared about prophecy. I mean, he's sitting there. He doesn't know about the prince that was promised prophecy. Isn't that central to the Azor Ahai religion? He doesn't know about the Azor Ahai religion. He's living in Essos and he's never heard of the prince that was promised prophecy. I mean, does that really make sense? He literally says to her, "What?"
To continue playing devil's advocate, him not knowing about the Azor Ahai prophecy and all that stuff, that could just be some bullshit fairy tale that people tell the world over with their own different versions of it, like how we have in our own world with some of this crap. And you don't really take it seriously. Yeah. It kind of goes over your head that this could be an actual thing. And then all of a sudden here you have, his ancestor, oh, this is an actual thing. This is an actual thing that may come to pass. Maybe. They don't know yet.
I guess they actually do it in Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, they established that Azor Ahai and the prince that was promised are the same person. Okay, and no one ever has confusion that prince that was promised and Azor Ahai are the same person. And there's not even that much confusion in the written material about that. I think there's debate amongst fans that whether the prince that was promised is Azor Ahai, but clearly all of the characters that talk about these prophecies in both the books and Game of Thrones, the series, believe that the Prince of Promise and Azor Ahai are the same person, and that Azor Ahai is a central figure to the religion of R'hllor. And the religion of R'hllor is a pretty big religion, like that has.
Did they ever even use the word, the words Azor Ahai? Was that ever uttered in Game of Thrones? I don't remember.
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure, but you'd think that you'd think that maybe second season or something, Melisandre would have said it, right? But
I think they've always kept it simplistic and used Lord of Light and
Prince that was promised.
Prince that was promised. Yeah.
All right. Well, that actually even makes it worse, because that means we're like that means there's no disconnect. That means the prince that was promised is part of the Azor Ahai religion, a major religion in Essos, a city that Daemon spends a decade living in, researching history and prophecy.
But I know what you mean in regards to the inconsistency with Daemon. Some of the writers have come out and said that they don't understand how the fandom can be so much in love with him.
Yeah.
And
the fans, I'll tell you this: the fans don't like Daemon. The fans like Matt Smith. Okay.
Okay, that's fair.
Matt Smith is super charismatic, and people love Matt Smith. Okay, but there's nothing contained in the character of Daemon where you're like, that Daemon, love that guy. He's just random. He's fucking random.
That's fair. But there is supposedly a scene also from the same league, same guy, very credible person, saying how during the scene where Rhaenyra is burying her kid, Daemon is there with her. So it feels very weird that they chose not to have him in the same room as their child is being, wrapped up and all that.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
Isn't it really weird that they changed the sex of the baby for no reason?
Did they? I thought the in the books, what was it? Because in the show,
it's Visenya. Isn't she Visenya in the?
Yes, in the show,
right?
Yes.
And then I clearly saw dong. I clearly saw penis on that baby.
Well, it was a very deformed, So.
Well, I mean, he didn't look. So the source material actually says scales and shit like that, and they didn't really show. They didn't show a baby. They didn't show a baby that was different from, regularly deformed babies that exist in our world. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're correct. In the leaks, same guy, same credible source. The child was supposed to have looked like a dragon, like a little baby dragon with scales and wings and stuff, kind of reminiscent of what happened in Game of Thrones with Daenerys. I don't know why they changed it, but there's a lot of weird editing choices, specifically with Daemon. He's not supposed to.
Well, I will say this. So far, and somebody asked, one of my fans asked me this question of Preston, do you think it's really amazing that there has been absolutely no magic in House of the Dragon? And
someone, I think the same guy asked the same question about that. Like, where is all the magic?
Where's the magic? There's no magic. There's no magic.
I thought you were okay with that. You don't like magic.
I am. I don't. I'm complete. I think it's a great. I thought it was a great choice for Game of Thrones to pull back those elements and make it more real. And House of the Dragon has done it completely and utterly. There's no spells. There's no dragon babies. There's no one coming back from the dead. Other than dragons themselves, which are arguable
magical creatures,
telepathic connections with your dragon, which I think other than telepathic connections to a dragon and dragons themselves, we have not seen any other types of magic in House of the Dragon. So, which is an interesting choice.
But for the most part, like I said, the editings for Daemon's stuff was very weird. It's like they're trying to make him an asshole. He's supposed to freak out and have this emotional breakdown on the beach, which we've seen. We did see leaked photos of that last year of him on the beach breaking down, on his knees and having a whole fit. Mm-hmm. And that was supposed to have been because no one told him about this threat from the north. It's been kept from him his whole life. What the fuck? But instead, they
doesn't make Right. And I say that doesn't make any sense. I don't know what, and I don't know what it adds to the story that Rhaenyra really was so much the true heir that she was the only person that was told. But the thing is, Daemon really was Viserys' heir for a while. Why wouldn't Viserys tell Daemon about the prophecy?
Because he was holding off on having a boy.
Yeah, he's holding off on having a boy, I guess. Yeah, because of the dream. Fair enough. Creates that disconnect between the brothers. Like, oh, I guess he didn't really love me enough to tell me the prophecy. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
I guess
weird episode for Daemon. He had some really cool scenes. I love him threatening the Kingsguard. That was pretty cool. I love how he immediately takes charge of war preparation. That was pretty good. I loved him on the.
But they stole so much from the other characters. I mean,
that's what I was going to ask you next.
So keep in mind that, like, in the source material, and again, I have to reaffirm that, like, for the most part, I'll criticize the source material when it's bad, and there's many moments in the source material that I think are bad, that I think House of the Dragon has improved upon. But the weird thing is, because there's so many characters, and sometimes there's just one thing, like one major thing that they've given to a certain character that's defined, and because there's so little given, that's defined the character in my mind. So, for instance, Criston Cole being the Kingmaker, and what he does as Kingmaker is essentially all he fucking does in the source material. Like, he's got some little mentions here and there, or like one line about him killing, Joffrey Lonmouth, or one line about him like winning a tourney. His king-making thing was his thing. It was his defining character, as much as, like, I could have a defining character for Criston Cole. And then they stole it and they gave it to Alicent and Otto. Here, we took Rhaenys's defining fucking scene, and we give it to Daemon. And then we take Jacaerys's defining fucking scene, and we gave it to Daemon. And I was like, oh god, they ripped the two fucking, like, best parts of those characters and just handed it to Daemon.
So what are Rhaenys and Jacaerys' defining moments that they gave to him?
So Rhaenys, of course, Rhaenys in the source material does nothing for 30 years. She loses the Council of One-on-One, does nothing for 30 years, shows up at the Black Council, and she's the one that does the dragon count and is like, guys, we got this war because we got the most dragons. And she lists out the dragons and she's like, this is the state of things. We're good. And that's kind of like how I saw, like, Rhaenys, like, oh my gosh, like, she was a big picture calculating person. She figured out what was important. Like, she's taking control and being like the military, like, doing the military analysis. And that's how I always saw Rhaenys, as like this calculating big picture woman who, like, can win the war. And then they took that away and gave it to Daemon. And now Rhaenys, I don't know what she is. Like, the entire series.
She's a mother. She's a mother.
I guess so. She's a mother, except when she's murdering hundreds, breaking through the floor. And then they took so Jace is the one who comes up with the idea of using other people to ride dragons. And
Daemon didn't really specifically say, like, we'll find other people to ride these dragons. What he said was, we have other dragons here with no riders. He doesn't specifically mention any dragon seeds or any other potential people.
Right, but how else would they... I mean, besides, at this point, Rhaena, who else would be a candidate? Like... I mean, Joffrey and Rhaena, but Joffrey's so young in this source. In this adaptation, Joffrey's so young.
Your boy Celtigar got mentioned.
Oh, I mean, I guess Bartimos Celtigar. You could try, or maybe Corlys. But if they think Celtigars, Celtigars, and Velaryons, or as George calls the Velaryons, the Valyrians. Do you know about that?
I try not to remember that.
Yeah, George pronounces Velaryon Valyrian. And you're like, wait, Valyrian and Valyrian? Like, yeah. Like, that's
I try to forget
Not
how
it's spelled.
he pronounces the Dothraki. But no,
Dothraki.
I didn't. Ryan Condal in an interview with Elio and Linda said that the Celtigars would be season 2.
He did. I thought, or he said that maybe he just said they were coming, but no, he was here. There it was, Bartimos. I mean, they didn't actually say Bartimos Celtigar or Bartimos Celtigar, but then they called him Bartimos, and then later they mentioned how Celtigar Celtigar in the when talking about who their support is. So it's clearly him.
Well, we also get
some
house mentions too that are like in the vicinity that owe fealty, like Bar Emin, Darklyn,
Massey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So good day for lore fans, of course.
Of course we can't. They did have the Rainy scoof where Rainy says that the High Septon crowned Aegon. You catch that?
Oh, you're the only person looking for that. I don't think anybody noticed.
What's really funny is that later in the episode they mention that somebody else says that only Septons crowned him, and she says the High Septon, which is really weird, but that they would fuck that up because considering it's Septon Eustace, how are you fucking up and thinking that Septon Eustace is the High Septon, but. Maybe Rhaenys is an idiot. I don't know. Why would that? The High Septon, but it's like the High Septon resides in Old Town in this period. No one would be that stupid. It'd be like someone being crowned in Paris and thinking that the Pope was there. You're like, but wait, the Pope lives in Rome. Oh, nah. Okay. But anyway, they fucked up and said that the High Septon crowned Aegon.
The war table. That is probably the shittiest war table I've ever seen. You could hardly make out what's going on. Thank God they have names of the several locations printed on it.
Right, and everybody was explaining it and putting the markers and shit. You couldn't. The visuals weren't giving anybody I think for lore fans, it was really cool that they were sitting there mentioning everything. And for lore people and people that know the map really well, when they start talking about the Golden Tooth and they start talking about, geography and stuff, that's cool. For someone that's not a huge lore fan, it would be gibberish. They're just I don't know what they're fucking talking about. West of the Golden Tooth, what does that mean?
Well, they mention a lot of the major houses, right? So, of course, fans are going to remember the major houses. Obviously, we have Stark, Arryn, Baratheon, Lannister, Tully. The Martells aren't really a part of the Seven Kingdoms yet, so you can really count them out.
And they glossed over the Reach,
Yeah, Tyrell doesn't really get a mention. Isn't that because the Lord of Highgarden is a little boy or a child at this point?
I think, the Tyrells largely sit out the war. I think they're fence sitters. I'll have to look it up, but specifically how old Tyrell is. But they're for the most part fence sitters during the Dance of the Dragons. You're right that Lord Lionel Tyrell was an infant, and his regent mother kind of didn't know what to do. Everybody thought that she was going to align with the Hightowers, but then they took no part in the war.
But I do like the strategy involved in the whole war preparation talk. Specifically focus on the Riverlands, because the Riverlands, of course, they're right in the middle of Westeros, and you hold the Riverlands, you really hold where armies can move around and position themselves effectively. If you hold the Riverlands and you're against the Starks, you can keep the Northmen from crossing the neck effectively. Same with the Arryns from the east and the Lannisters from the west. So holding that is fairly important. Plus, Harrenhal is there where you can move a massive amount of troops and coordinate efforts all over the place. And I like that Harrenhal got a mention. I like that these things are being brought up. People, you guys know me, I'm a lore nerd, and I love this stuff. I'm sorry, all that makes sense. And it makes sense that you need to send Daemon to the Riverlands because the Riverlands are the most important at the moment. It was kind of stupid to send Luke to Storm's End, but I guess Jace got two tasks. He had to go to the Vale and the North. But I think, or maybe they really thought that Storm's End was in the bag, so they send Luke to do the easiest job. But it turns out not to be the easiest job. But Daemon
they stole a lot of scenes from the Maesters that should have been the Maesters, right? They gave so Orwyle and Otto show up, and they give Orwyle's role to Otto. Which,
That's right.
Why would Alicent trust her father to deliver terms? Like, why would she do that? That's just boneheaded. That's ridiculous.
Because the fans don't really know or care about Orwyle that much. He's just a maester.
I'm just saying, logically speaking, with what you've established in the last episode, like, there's no reason that you'd send Otto. Like, he would be the last human being on Earth that you would send to Dragonstone.
Unless Alicent knew that, well, first off, you're essentially, if Alicent is smart, she's sending her father essentially to death, and that might be her plan to get his ass out of the way. Obviously, Alicent is not as ruthless in the show as she is in the book, but she's sending Otto to treat with fucking Daemon, who hates the shit out of him.
I know, it's right. Like, why? And the thing that doesn't make any sense, because clearly, like, Alicent wants there to be peace. She wants Rhaenyra. She doesn't want there to be war. She wants Rhaenyra to survive. She doesn't trust her own father. There's no reason you'd ever send Otto. Like, that's just so dumb. Like, it's so dumb. And it's like, oh, we need to give Rhys some lines in this episode. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Well, they paid him a fortune, so might as well get it worth out of him.
But it's really stupid. It's really stupid that they sent him. And also that the blocking of that scene's ridiculous. Why would Rhaenyra land and then walk through the guards of the opposing side? Like, any one of them could have just stabbed her and been like, that would have been done.
It's a boss moment. You know, there it is.
It's a dumb moment. That was a really horrible scene.
It's for her to show she's not afraid of them and that she can.
I know. I know. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Oh God, I hated that. What are we getting at? I mean, things were acted well. You know, you got the funerals. I liked Eric Cargyle showing up
with the crown. How did he get away?
I liked the threat. Well, we showed him. He was last seen in the streets of King's Landing, trying to run off with Rhaenys. I guess he just found a ship. He ran down to the port and got a ship, while everybody else was at the dragon pit.
I am wondering though if, like, once again, to call back to the same person I've been talking about, the leaker, in his original episode original episode 9 leak, Eric does escape with Rhaenys. He's on Dragonback with her, and they escape. There's no mention of Rhaenys stopping in front of the royal family and threatening them and killing thousands. So I'm wondering if this was added in after the fact. Someone also in my comment section made a very good point about the issues that we were having, you, me, and Trey, last podcast. For those of you who don't know, we did a podcast for episode 9 with Trey the Explainer. It's on my channel. And we briefly touched on how Ryan Condal says one thing, and then one of the writers says another thing in an interview. Someone made a very good point. They were probably writing this and doing this during COVID. And it was probably difficult getting together and really coming together on this one thing.
And maybe it's the function of COVID, and they're not all in the same room, as you said, and they're doing things remotely, or just the nature of having a different writer for every episode. Like at least with Dan and Dave, they were writing everything, right? And so they kind of remember what they did and didn't do, except for they did do like some major contradictions when they were like years apart, but I'll grant that from like episode to episode, there wasn't that much variance in character. While here, between episodes, it's like we're viewing completely different characters. And I think the primary reason is that it's different writers and they're writing them differently. And a little bit of like George, like trying to go back to what George had written, and that contradicting with something that they'd established in the writing.
So I'm glad you mentioned George, because before we started recording, you were telling me how you were annoyed with George. What did he do? Besides not release Winds of Winter.
So There's a few things that on this portion of Fire and Blood or Princess and the Queen that kind of frustrate me, and that's mainly well, it a lot has to do with the Aemond versus Luke scene, but a bit of it is he has some inconsistent characters, and I think in Fire and Blood, Aemond is an inconsistent character, and he contradicts himself. So, for instance, this is straight from Fire and Blood. Aemond gets his eye slashed out, and he says, "Oh, it was a fair exchange. Like, I lost an eye, but I gained a dragon." So he sounds like this ultra cool dude. Like, I lost an eye, and I'm gonna keep it together. Fast forward, and this is straight from Fire and Blood. Like, he is seething with anger and says to Luke, "You have a debt to pay," and wants Luke's eye. All right. Well, you just established that he thought that the debt was paid. He got a dragon, and now in the next scene that we have him, he's saying that the debt needs to be paid. You're contradicting yourself, not only in the words being said, but in the character himself. What, he's cool and collected when he's a young boy, but now he's like seething with anger as an older person. It's usually the other way around.
Isn't he a young teenager here? He's a 16, 17 around there. I would chop that up to angsty teen, edgy.
I guess, but why as a younger kid was he like, "Oh, it was a fair trade. You know, I lost an eye and gained a dragon." Like I think the Aemon character was just stupidly written from those two scenes. And those two, now granted, the big difference between like why Aemond, when he gets his eyes slashed out, is a completely different character from Aemond during the Dance of the Dragons is because they're in two different pieces. Like, Princess and the Queen was written first, and then George went back and wrote The Rogue Prince. And so he wrote them at kind of different times and in different contexts, and he was trying to fill stuff in. He was trying to make characters look cool, and he made making Aemond look cool about being nonchalant about losing an eye. Like, it was a bad decision when you try to have it compared to how he was acting in Princess and the Queen. That's George's fault. George also makes a really kind of, I don't like his retcon here. So in the original Princess, and this was eliminated from the show, so you won't see this in the show, but we're fast forwarding to the Luke Aemon scene. So I don't know. I thought the dragon fight looked beautiful. I thought that looked really cool. I liked it.
Oh, the shot where Vhagar is flying right above Arax. Oh my god, so good.
Yeah. Going through that canyon, I thought that looked cool. I mean, getting ahead of myself, I did not like the walking back Aemond wanting to kill Luke. Like, that was just silly. Like, you know, like, all of a sudden, like, Vhagar, he's not in control of Vhagar, and he's like, and Vhagar does it, like, ugh.
So at first I thought it was silly that even after 6 years, Aemon still can't control Vhagar, but like, after thinking about it for a while, it starts to make sense, kinda, because Vhagar is older and larger. I guess you need a stronger will and stronger psychic connection to it, and maybe that takes time to establish. But I didn't hate the change from the book to show. I didn't hate it. He's not generic bad guy villain, and I kind of like that.
Well, here's my big problem with the whole scene is, so the show has a superior Aemond. Okay, episode 8's Aemond, episode 9's Aemond. I'm sorry, episode 8 and 9, whatever. Both Aemonds are a superior Aemond than what is written in Fire and Blood. Okay, Aemond being this restrained guy who is focused on being king, reading poetry, a better leader, a so-called better king, at least more focused and determined than Aegon, is a really interesting take. And I like how they established that. They established that in young Aemond. They built it all the way up to episode 9 Aemond, We got a feeling of what the type of character that Aemond was. Calm, focused, determined, ruthless maybe, but he's there. All of a sudden, we because they had to go back to the book material, they're doing checklists. He's a freaking laughing anime villain, okay, in this episode, as he is in the source material. Like, going into Storm's End and him all of a sudden unreasonably wanting Luke to stab out his own eye and then showing him the sapphire and then going onto a dragon and killing Luke. With all of that is a freaking madman, okay? And that is not the character that was established in the previous episodes. That was not the character at all that was established in the previous episodes. House of the Dragon had created a much better Aemond than George R. R. Martin did. And then they had to throw him away in order to fit what George did. And I'm just like, if you're gonna do something, if you're gonna make a creative change, commit to the change. Don't be half-assed. Don't have one foot in one camp and one foot in the other. If you're and that was the problem, is all of a sudden Luke goes into Storm's End and it's a completely different Aemond in every respect. And so now he's a madman Aemond and wants to kill Luke for taking out his eye. Gets on that dragon. And then even that, they decided they couldn't go all the way, and they decide to go back on it and be like, oh, he didn't mean to kill Luke. Oh, fuck you guys, okay? He demanded Luke stab out his own eye, and then chased him on an enormous dragon in a fight in the sky. Of course he wanted to fucking kill Luke. Like, it was just ridiculous that he's like, oh, Vagar, no, oh, and then is like, oh, what did I do? Oh, God, really? Like, the characters all over the map. That was a really bad, I think it was a really bad decision. Well, one, I think it was a bad decision to follow George's material too closely in this situation. But two, like, if you're gonna commit, fucking commit. Don't go back on it.
Reminds me of the sitcom Family Matters, where Steve Urkel's like, "Did I do that?" Yeah, you did.
Right.
And the whole situation is being memed to death because there's
a similar scene in How to Train a Dragon and things like that.
And how people are saying, wait, so if Aemon didn't mean to kill Luke in that moment, does that mean Dany didn't mean to burn all those people and just Drogon did it by himself? Drogon, no! Don't burn all those people in King's Landing? No! Aw, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, George's scene, like I say, I think is I mean, they didn't interpret it how I would have interpreted it, and now I have to go through like what George's original scene was and what his retcon is. So in George's original scene, Luke shows up at Storm's End. Aemond is there. Baratheon is illiterate, so his maester.
They kept that in there. I noticed that because you pointed that out when we did the podcast.
Yeah. Now, the big thing is, well, the one difference I'd say between source material and the show is that Baratheon seems pretty irate and annoyed before reading the message, and he seems pretty irate after. In the source material, he's irate after the message is read to him, which gives more of an impression that the maester maybe said things differently and twisted the words. But this is very maester conspiracy. They played it down quite a bit. So, I mean, I guess there's some attention, on the fact that he yells maester and the maester has to go in. But it doesn't seem like his attitude is shifted by the maester too much. But whatever the case, that was the original scene. Then a lot of the lines are straight from the source material. I'm already betrothed, and what are you offering me? And then the asking for his eye and the debt to be paid and them leaving and Aemon killing him. That's all beat for beat there. Between George writing Princess and the Queen and Fire and Blood, George added one other thing, and I'm glad that House of the Dragon eliminated it. he adds, so Baratheon has 4 daughters, and Aemon is allowed to choose one of them, and he chooses one of the pretty ones, and one of the uglier ones who's clever gets angry,
And she goads him.
and she goads him. Her name is Maris, which is a name that George uses a lot because Maris is the main character of Windhaven, which is, you know, his story with Lisa Tuttle about that so much stuff is taken from, like the Eyrie is and Sorella Sand, Sorella, and all these different things are taken from that story. But Maris is the main character of that. Fisherman's daughter is taken from that. But so Maris goads him and says like, "Oh, I'm glad, you know." She says something about him not having testicles or him not having balls or something, and that's the thing that makes him go out and lose his temper and go out and kill Luke, which also like downplays the Maester conspiracy, you know, like, but unless she's part of it, I don't know, but it was just kind of this added thing, like, why would this random daughter be goading Aemond? What does that have to do with anything? And it was almost like George just needed a couple paragraphs. He was just trying to fill out material, but they didn't include it. You know, it was not in the original Princess and the Queen. He added it to Fire and Blood about Maris Baratheon being the person that goads Aemond into doing it, and they didn't put it in. I
actually like that. George needed to fill in some paragraphs so he could put an extra ad for the book. I like that YouTuber mentality. But no, I understand. To me, the way it came off is that Aemon, you know, he acted like he was the anime villain, the final boss, but in the end, with that whole bullshit at the end, it's really sounded like he was just putting up a front, paper tiger type of situation, you know.
But what did he plan on doing? Just scaring Luke?
I guess scaring him. Once again, the meme was that, bro, Vhagar, chill, it was a prank. Come on, you didn't have to go that hard. That's the meme right now, so I guess just scare him. That was the whole thing. Yeah.
Now, one thing, and George didn't even think about this, is how do we even know Luke died? Because they never, in the source material, Luke's fate is somewhat ambiguous. They give a few possibilities. One, that Luke is gulped down by Vhagar, which is, I think, what they pretty much showed here in the in House of the Dragon. I'll have to rewatch it frame by frame. But
it didn't look. I've seen it several times. It didn't look like Vhagar gulped him down. It looked like Vhagar chomped on him and then just kind of spit out, maybe swallowed some stuff, but spit everything out like right after the fact, just to kill.
Yeah, and so another idea besides being gulped down is that he fell to the ground and then was washed ashore near Storm's End, and they found his body. And then the other is that he actually survived, had amnesia, and lived out his life like as like a fisherman.
Yeah. Where the fuck did that one come from?
I don't know. It's just it's in there. Let me find. Let me read you the actual like line. He says, okay. Some say okay. Arax fell, broken, to be swallowed by the storm-lashed waters of the bay, his head and neck washed up beneath the cliffs below Storm's End 3 days later, to make a feast of crabs and seagulls. Mushroom claims that Lucerys' corpse washed up as well, and tells us that Prince Aemon cut out his eyes and presented them to Lady Maris on a bed of seaweed, but this seems excessive. Some say Vhagar snatched Lucerys off his dragon back and swallowed him whole. It has even been claimed that the prince survived his fall, swam to safety, but lost all memory of who he was, spending the rest of his days as a simple-minded fisherman.
Okay.
The true telling gives all of these tales the respect they deserve, which is to say, none. Lucerys Velaryon died with his dragon, Munkin insists. This is undoubtedly correct. The prince was 13 years of age, his body was never found, and with his death, The War of the Ravens and envoys and marriage pacts came to an end, and the War of Fire and Blood began in earnest.
That's funny.
Aemon Targaryen would be henceforth known as Aemon the Kinslayer.
That's funny. Well, that's another thing. People are, first off, everyone's really obsessed with kinslaying lately. Ever since episode 9, people are saying, "Well, yeah, Aemon didn't mean to do it. He's no kinslayer," and now he's gonna hold to that. I would love it if somehow Luke did survive, and then as Laenor was returning just for a small visit, he passes on Luke, and he's like, "Oh my God, Luke, what happened? Oh, we got to get you out of here." And returns back to Essos.
It's just they start a club of like missing characters who survived.
Half the people from the Dragon Pit and King's Landing who Rhaenys was supposed to kill, they used that as an opportunity to go over there as well.
We all made it. We all made it.
Just looking for an excuse to get out of here. But shout out to my guy Jurgen. He made a very good point about that whole situation regarding the dragons and how they're connected to their writer. So he says here, if you don't mind, he says, Aemon killing Luke on accident. I feel like there was subtlety to it that people didn't really get. The entire episode, Lucerys was seen as incredibly anxious and resisting. Stuff in Storm's End goes down, he leaves the castle, he walks up to his dragon, who is also clearly in distress, mirroring Luke's emotions, and tells him to calm down. I feel like this was very blatantly the show emulating the emotional bond between a dragon and its writer. Luke is an anxious mess for all of it, which I believe resulted in Arrax lashing out against Vhagar out of anxiety. Aemon, on the other hand, is his usual self-indulging self and was laughing while chasing Arrax, was absolutely delighted. I feel like Vhagar got caught up in the emotions of her dragon rider and killed Arrax as a mirror to her rider. Same for Lucerys. Yeah, I can see that.
That's interesting and all. It is. What the idea is that what the subconscious of the rider can affect the conscious of the dragon. But also it seems like the subconscious of the dragon would affect, the conscious of the dragon would affect the subconscious of the rider, right? Like, in Ice and Fire, we have like this idea that the wolves make the Starks more aggressive, or that the dragons make Dany more aggressive. In a sense, you could perhaps like blame the burning of King's Landing on Drogon and not on Dany. That it was actually Drogon's mind blending with Dany that did it, that it was not Dany's fault. Because there's definitely like these, aspects of like Dany becoming very weird and confident once she has these dragons. Does it happen in reverse? Do the dragons take on the subconscious of the writers? I'm trying to think of things in the books that might support that. But I don't know. I don't know if there's much. I mean, certainly, except for me. Okay, the one example I can think of is Drogon returning to the fighting pits. That seems to be some sort of like subconscious aspect of Dany that calls Drogon, like subconsciously. Like Dany's conscious mind knows that she wants to be Queen of Meereen and make peace and marry Hisdar, but her subconscious mind wants freedom and wants to escape, right? So Drogon arriving is him doing the bidding of her subconscious mind. Like I could make the argument in that scene, the dragon acts on the rider's subconscious. So that maybe Vhagar subconsciously wanted to kill Luke. Luke subconsciously was in a fight or flight situation, attacked the dragon, that kind of thing. I'm assuming,
Luke had more control over Arrax, kinda, than Aemon did. I'm assuming that's because...
Arrax attacked Vhagar also out of Luke's control. Right. So one could argue that it was neither of them. One could argue that if we take away the subconscious links, that it was Arrax's fault. Arrax attacked Vhagar, and Vhagar wanted revenge for getting a flame to the face.
Well, I would say... Well, by the way, that's not also in the show, which is weird. The dragons, whenever the Greens and the Black faction being next to each other, their dragons would sometimes, nip at each other and spit fire in that direction. That's not in here. But I would argue that Luke had slightly better control over Arax than Aemon did with Vhagar because maybe the size of the dragon matters. It's kind of harder to control Vhagar because she's so big.
Luke has also been riding longer.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But no, that was my mentality. To you think Aemon would have more control over his dragon, but what Jurgen here said here was fairly interesting.
No, it's interesting, and one can make the argument that the evidence of Dany at the fighting pits I think is perhaps evidence of
the
that,
other thing people have been saying all over social media when this came out is that Viserys, he was right back in episode 1. Dragons, they're a power we were never meant to have. We can't really control them completely. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's one of those like blanketly obvious statements that that's gonna become true. I mean, it's like Helena, I think it is our fate to desire what others possess. Oh, really? People are gonna act jealous. Really? Oh, predicting the future. We can't fully control dragons. All right.
But while we're on the Storm Ends scene, this is something I was telling you beforehand. So for those of you who didn't watch it, in our last podcast with Trey, Preston goes off on this thing about how the Eyrie is supposed to represent Lysa's womanly parts. And yes. I don't want to get you demonetized, so and if you're gonna get demonetized, it won't be on my ass. But Storm's End. I've been waiting to see Storm's End for the longest time, and we get to see it. At first, when Luke is flying towards it, I'm like, is that a watchtower? And no, that's part of the castle. The castle is one...
Yeah, that's the drum tower, I imagine.
It's one giant middle finger.
Yeah.
Or one giant penis, essentially, because...
Yes. And that's not... That's not incorrect to say that, if you actually look at the description of Storm's End, the things they got right there are certain things that they got right about Storm's End, and there's certain things they didn't get right about Storm's End. So Storm's End, yes, is a massive big tower with a kind of bulbous head at the top. It's compared to a fist.
That'll look like it.
Like an arm. Yeah, an arm coming up, but in the same, if you're going to have a large tower with a bulbous end, of course people are also going to think penis, right? And then it's supposed to have an oval shaped castle around it with a perfectly smooth wall. And they didn't really have that part. And I think they made the drum tower bigger than I would have thought compared to
comically bigger.
But it's supposed to be it's supposed to be a colossal drum tower, and it's supposed to have battlements at the top, and then a spiked fist is what it's described like. Yeah.
I'm sure when Jeff Bezos constructed his rocket, he thought it looked like a fist too, but in the end, it looked like a dick.
Right. Yes. As does the Amazon logo.
What?
You look at the Amazon logo.
The Amazon logo they made
a joke about this in Silicon Valley, where one of the characters who's supposed to be a Bezos clone does a signature, and his signature just looks like a dick. But look at the Amazon logo looks like
not
a
really.
Dick.
That's supposed to be an arrow. We have everything from A to Z, and that's the arrow.
Yeah, but the shape of the arrow and the roundedness of it, it's just the angle of it is helmet.
You're ridiculous. Get out of here. Stop it.
No, this isn't just me. A lot of people have said this for a long time that the Amazon logo, it's shaped like a dick. Especially the underside of a dick.
Yeah, guys, let me know in the comments below if you agree with that. I
No, the underside. The underside of your it definitely looks like the underside of a dick.
No. So okay. So Storm's End. We got Storm's End finally. Yay! It was very stormy.
Yeah.
What else was in this episode that stood out? Oh, we finally got another baby birthing scene. That's something you.
Well, what's funny is that I trashed the show, or I like made fun of the show in episode 6 for not showing the birth, and then they went and they showed pretty much the birth here. Like they showed her like the head, the slimy head, just like coming out, as much as they could. So like I give them props for that. They I was like hitting them before for not showing it, and then they went and they freaking just showed it. I was like, all right, that's good on them. Good on them. I take back my criticisms of episode 6 at the beginning. Like you guys did have the balls to show a birth, and so they did. But yeah, that was a very carnal, visceral scene. I definitely felt the pain of Rhaenyra in that scene. I don't know why they switched its sex, but a lot did seem to be happening all at once, which was perhaps a bit much. Like it seems like within the same day, like Rhaenys is arriving and we've got this birth, and then they're crowning her, and then Eric arrives, and then Corlys is no longer dying of a fever. Like, it's pretty crazy. What do you think of Corlys' turnaround?
It's a good thing, like, Rhaenys gave him the reality of the situation, because I thought it was so naive of him to think that he could just sit this out. Because, like, he's married to a dragon rider, and his granddaughter is a dragon rider, who's going to be in league with Daemon, who is fully committed to this whole thing. Then you got the biggest fleet in the country. Like, sitting this out is not really something anyone with that much power, influence, and connection can really do. Well, maybe if you were, like, a minor house.
Or your Dornish.
Or it's your Dornish. Most of the times you can't really sit it out. You really can't. It's very naive to think that.
Yeah. That's true. But, I mean, Doran Martell is very good at it. Like, pretending he's on people's sides and demanding more and more, and then never doing anything. This all, like, they kind of have these, like, these big, changes that they make, and then they have to deal with the ripples down the line. Like, people thinking that Rhaenyra might have killed Laenor and Laena is such a weird thing to have shoved in there, and now they have to keep justifying, like, why Rhaenys and Corlys would support her after that, and it's tough. Like, they have to keep twisting their logic on, like, wait, why are we supporting this woman if she was complicit in killing our son? Like, well, I guess we got to. They could just say, like, for Baela and Rhaena, like, it could just be that simple, but they don't actually do that. So,
well, to be fair, when Otto comes with the terms, he's very generous towards her actual trueborn sons, kinda. In reality, these are hostage terms. They'll be hostages.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, they pass over.
And I'm glad they called that out, even though he just called it. Daemon kind of said, like, to be your cupbearer, as if that was, like, a lowly position, but it was more like they're hostages. Like the, so this is from the source material. That the terms are almost from the source material verbatim, where they come and they supposedly give generous terms, and the terms are not generous at all. So Rhaenyra is, of course, queen, and the only thing they really offer her is Dragonstone as the consolation prize. Like, oh, you can have Dragonstone forever, and be the lord a lady of that.
Well, isn't that mirror what happened with Jaehaerys and Dreamfire Rhaena?
No, in Dream Jaehaerys just lets her live there. I mean, I guess it's somewhat paralleled, but, like, I think in this situation that she was getting allowed it as a new fief in perpetuity. Rhaenys just got to live there, I think. I don't know if she was ever if her kids were ever supposed to get it in perpetuity. I mean, I have to recheck that, but I think there was a slight difference. But you are right that there's this whole, shove them on Dragonstone kind of aspect of getting rid of your rival. But the only thing that Rhaenyra would get out of it is, Dragonstone. But when the whole Seven Kingdoms. And in return, she would have to give her sons as hostages. And, Luke being the Lord of Driftmark he was going to have that before. So I always say that this is another thing, like, if we're talking Maester conspiracy, where the Maesters screw it up, because Orwyle is the one that treats, and he, there's no back and forth, right? Like, and I say that, this makes Cleos Frey like infinitely better negotiator than Maester Orwyle, who is trained in this. Keep in mind, like, Maesters are trained in negotiation, and so, yeah, the terms offered by the king were generous. Mumpkin declares the princess would acknowledge him as king and make obeisance before the Iron Throne. Aegon would confirm her in possession of Dragonstone and allow the island to pass to her son. No, it says she would allow the castle to pass to her son Jacaerys upon her death. The second son, Lucerys, would be recognized as the rightful heir to Driftmark.
Huh. And then, that's weird, because Otto says trueborn sons, Viserys.
Oh, so they change. Oh, that's a change for the show then. Yeah, that's a change for the show then, because in the source material they allow Jace and Luke to be recognized as trueborn heirs, but it would be Aegon the Younger and Viserys who would be given place of honor at court, the king's squire and the king's cupbearer, and then pardons for everybody who conspired.
I'm sorry.
So
I'm wrong.
It's like,
I thought he said Viserys. He says Jacaerys. My bad. It's tough watching this sometimes without subtitles. He says here.
Yeah.
It will pass to your trueborn son Jacaerys upon your death.
Oh, he says Jacaerys. Okay. I'm sorry. That's my mistake.
Yeah. And then immediately she asks Orwyle who Viserys served, or who Viserys named, and Orwyle has to admit, well, it was you. So Orwyle screws it up by replying that by reciting the Great Council of 101, and apparently just like ruined the whole negotiation. So like it was just kind of ridiculous. So
Orwyle being part of the conspiracy was always so random and weird to me. Does Orwyle have any specific annoyance or grievance with Rhaenyra that he would join this conspiracy just randomly? Or unless we're talking Maester conspiracy, then he's just doing what Otto.
I mean, you have to accept Maester conspiracy, right?
Well, yeah. Like, if you take in Maester conspiracy, then he's just following Otto's lead.
Right.
By the way, real quick, did you notice that when Otto arrives at Dragonstone and they come up and tell Rhaenyra that someone's arrived, that they're flying the banner of a green dragon, they changed the green faction's sigil from the gold dragon to the green one for some reason?
Right. In the source material, Rhaenyra's sigil is the Targaryens, two Targaryen sigils quartered with Aeron and Velaryon. Mm-hmm. And then Aegon the Second sigil is the
Targaryen sigil on the Targaryen sigil in gold. Yeah,
because gold for his dragon Sunfire on black. Yeah, so a green dragon, like that's interesting.
Holy fucking shit! People will not stop complaining about them not being able to see Sunfire. Like there are so many people complaining that we did not get Sunfire in the show. We see him in the distance in episode 7, but
he's flying away from the funeral.
Right,
yeah.
But we didn't get a chance to actually see Sunfire, and people not stop complaining about this. The Sunfire is the Snyder cut of the dragons, and everyone just wants to see it, even though they don't really know.
I mean, let's be honest. Like in general, plot-wise, they should have been showing dragons a lot more. Like, we should have been seeing, like, our characters train with dragons so that we know they're dragon riders, flying around a lot more. But, they clearly have their budget limitations, and the dragons just kind of show up at certain times, when...
Budget limitations, but at the same time, I also get it. You kind of want to, even though we're in a fantasy setting, they kind of want to tone down the fantasy stuff because they tone down magic almost completely, and and I guess they're also toning down the magical creatures completely as well, and only really dishing them out when truly necessary.
Now, which dragon does it? When Daemon went in to see that dragon. By the way, Caraxes looked fake this episode, but all the other dragons looked fucking awesome.
But Preston, this was the review copy. It's never polished on that.
Fair enough. Who's the dragon that Daemon sees at the end? Is that
the one he's singing to? Is Jaehaerys' dragon, Vermithor?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. How did you find that out? Does he?
How do you think?
Oh, okay.
But like I said, there are a lot of weird editing cuts this time around. Him just strangling her
weird,
out of the
right?
fucking blue.
Weird. Like I say, every episode a different Daemon. Every episode a different Daemon.
People are going to argue that it falls in line with Daemon, and I'm willing to hear that argument. But it does seem like a weird decision. Once again, I get that Daemon's supposed to be like this douchey bad boy, and he shows his love and loyalties in his own way. But at the same time, there was some weird decisions with Daemon this episode.
Oh yeah,
and I would like to see what they have to say on that, because, like I said, in the leaks, he's with her, like wrapping her child ready for the burial. He's with her, and he only lashes out and has that emotional scene on the beach after she tells him that Viserys never really considered him the true heir,
right?
Because he was never told. So
yeah,
a lot of weird scenes with Daemon. But also a lot of good scenes with Daemon. I love him getting the Kingsguard to swear fealty to Rhaenyra.
Oh,
that was cool. I loved him on the bridge. That was cool as well. Or the walkway. That was great. What else was in this episode? You know me, I love the lore stuff. I love the lore talk. Them preparing for war once again.
Considering how gut punch most of the episodes have ended with, do you think the ending came a little fast and weird?
I'm so glad you brought this up, because people, I hit up our resident crazy person, Dragon Demands. He hit me up. He goes, "What did you think?" And I told him, well, like, the finale really felt like they filmed more episodes, because this did not feel like a finale at all. This actually felt like the real episode 9.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what are we going to do next week? Right.
The way they end so abruptly, like, I get it, but at the same time, it's just after the fact.
Had there been like a different music, and maybe they just held on it for a few more seconds or something, or she just looked a little more angry, or in the source material she collapses from the news, rather than just kind of like turning around and looking like somewhat determined. I mean, I don't want anything as cheesy and over the top as no Darth Vader at the end of, Revenge of the Sith. But, had she turned around and just screamed into the camera and then it would have ended, I wonder if I would have liked that, What do you think? Just her turning around and then she's just calm and then she just screams and goes, "Nah!" and then it just ends. Like, then you're like, whoa.
I don't know about that.
I'm just saying, trying something, because her turning around, like, and being upset, but like she's there's a lot of things to be upset about in this episode. Like we're supposed to feel like this is the thing that breaks her, like she was restrained for the whole, like she had a stillbirth. Let's start. She got usurped. She had a stillbirth. She got shitty terms. She's gotten some marriage trouble with Daemon. He choked her a bit. Like there's a lot of bad shit that she's taken in this. And then the final gut punch, Luke gets killed. I don't know how they find out Luke gets killed. Like, did Aemond tell them? Like, I don't... Like, there's no... Like, this is George's problem, too. Like, how do you know that Luke died? Like...
My assumption here is that, like, Luke died very close to Storm's End. Like, super close, to the point where patrols come around and they see it, and they inform Lord Boros, and it gets back.
Despite the fact that we saw them, like, specifically on like deserted rocks, but okay.
Yeah, I know. I know.
But I needed to feel that this was the big straw, the log that broke the camel's back, and now we're going to be seeing a different Rhaenyra, like gloves off, like that's what I wanted, like gloves off. It's go time. Like that's but I didn't really get that. I didn't really get that feeling. As she just kind of turns around upset. End of episode. Okay.
It ends very abruptly. Once again, like I get it,
Yeah.
I get it. She's taken so many hits this episode, and it's but it really did not feel like the finale. It felt like there's one more episode left, and that's the episode where we deal with the aftermath of everything. And I don't know, maybe that's why I was thinking like blood and cheese this season. No, this is it. This is how it starts. So
I mean, they could have. It would have even been a stronger ending had they just ended it with Luke's death. And not had the Rhaenyra reaction, because then you wouldn't even have to worry about how did Rhaenyra hear about it, because you can like say like time's passed, but like you just you show like Luke's mangled corpse and Aemond like looking weird about it, and then end,
if I was gonna end it on Luke's death, I wouldn't want Aemond to go like that face he makes, like, oh fuck, what have I done? Like. I wouldn't.
No, I mean, then I would have, him like fly off and then another shot of Luke's body, and then it'd just be the end, What
kind of ending is that, though? He ended right there. What kind of ending is that?
I mean, better than just Rhaenyra turning around upset, like mildly upset. Like, come on.
You know what? I do not envy Ryan Condal here, because how do you end this episode? How do you end this?
How do you end this episode? Like I said, I think you needed like some bigger scene or something. I don't know. I mean, Lena got a montage, right? Like, like
this needed at least 2 more episodes.
Something.
Episode 11 should have been blood and cheese, and then 12.
Whatever. This should have been season 2, and then we would have had everything would have been different. So,
yeah. But no, overall, I saw a lot of people saying they hated the episode. I don't know why. It was a fine.
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go hate. No.
So you spent the last 40 minutes just like ripping this thing apart.
No, but but there's a lot of there's a lot of really great things about this episode, and there's a lot of little bad things about this episode, but there's nothing disastrously bad about this episode. Okay. Which is what I cannot say that about quite a few of the episodes that have disastrously bad things about them. There is zero disastrously bad. Everything that we talked about that's bad and off of this in this episode is minor. It's very minor. Like characters being out of character, little inconsistencies with previous episodes. It's all livable. It didn't take me out of the moment too much. It's not fucking beating to death Joffrey Lonmouth and then having no reaction from anybody. It's not just like people dying like right and left at a tourney for no reason. It's not Rhaenys busting through the floor and murdering hundreds of people. Like, okay, there's nothing like that. This was a fine episode. It was fine. So don't get me wrong about like my reaction. Like, people are like, oh, Preston seems to hate everything. No, this is pretty good. It was a pretty good episode. It was very exciting. I liked a lot of all the performances. The dragon fight was great. I really loved the birth. I really loved Daemon testing the Kingsguard. I like Daemon's song. Daemon's song was cool. There's a lot of cool little scenes here and there.
When Eric shows up and hands the crown to Rhaenyra and she puts it on, it's a nice scene.
Yeah, that was a beautiful scene. That was a really cool scene. Yeah, there was a lot of really cool scenes in this. I do think in general the series is very disjointed. The characters are very disjointed from we complained a lot about the Baratheon scene, but in general though, like that was a really spooky scene with the lightning and the rain, and you felt Luke's fear when he walked in there and he saw Aemond. I mean, that'd be frightening as hell.
Specifically with Vhagar, how Vhagar comes up from like the background, like it's Jurassic Park. Remember in Jurassic Park with the T-Rex?
Oh, right. Yes, definitely the T-Rex.
I love it. So good.
Right. No, I definitely felt all, and that's the thing. The most important thing is to feel something. And it's like I felt a lot in this episode with Rhaenyra's stillbirth and Luke's fear going into Storm's End. So there was a lot more right with this episode than wrong. I think it was one of the better episodes. I thought it was good. There was nothing, and I'm just happy that there's nothing overtly bad. There's nothing like outrageously bad about this episode. So
if anything, I'm still conflicted on how Aemon, how I would have done Aemon in that final scene of him going, Vhagar, no. Yeah. Like I don't like.
I wouldn't have done that, but I wouldn't have done it the way George wrote it either. Like I liked the Vaemon they created. I would have had a more calculating Vaemond, you know.
Well, like I'm back and forth on it because at the same time, like Aemond is not a horrible person, but at the same time, they kind of
then have something like build him up and have him lose his temper, you know, Dany style.
Okay,
whatever.
I can see that.
Like,
he having a bad temper.
You know that fire blast could have him like all of a sudden, you know, have him lose a temper or something. But I mean, I guess like George did it by having Maris like insult his manhood. But you know, but I don't know, something. It was he just didn't feel like the same character that we'd seen.
Overall, what would you give this episode? Scale from 1 to 10. I gave episode 9 an 8.5. I thought it was very good.
I originally gave episode 9 an 8, but I think I'd probably knock down episode 9 having watched it again and because certain episodes like age differently in my mind and stuff like that. So I mean, I'd give this episode an 8, but I think I'm going to knock down last week's from an 8 to a 7. Just on having rewatched it and everything, but I do like this episode a lot. I think it's solid. I'll give it a good 8. Yeah.
Also, because people are going to ask real quick before we wrap it up, no, this was not better than Game of Thrones.
I just have to laugh. Like, no, it's not on par either.
The Thrones finale, the way it ends, holy shit! That ending was phenomenal.
You want to compare? Yeah, you want to compare Rhaenyra turning around and looking at the camera to fucking the dragons hatching and then everyone like panning out and everyone kneeling? Like, come on.
Because there's always people like that in the comments section who are high on the sauce right now. Relax, take it easy.
House of the Dragons is on par with peak Game of Thrones. No, it's not. No.
I will say though, I will say this in comparison to Game of Thrones, though this wasn't really George's work. It was, you know, Dave and Dan. Eric's versus Vhagar, way better than any dragon v dragon fight we got in the later seasons of Thrones. Way better. This small 5-minute scene here where they don't really fight. It's more of a chase and then one giant gulp at the end. Yeah. Way better than like the fighting that the Night King did versus Dany. At least I could see most of this, and there were some very cool shots. Yeah. That one.
It's look. I and we'll do a full season discussion.
I'm down.
As well. And I also like you have to like look at the incredible task that Ryan Condal had, and I look at the incredible task that D&D had, and like what they achieved for those first three seasons of Game of Thrones. Like what an impossible task to adapt this material. And like, it's just such an admirable job, you know, like Fire and Blood is like the fact that it's taking place over like 30 years. And it's just like something that George R. Martin crapped out and didn't really think about that much with contradictions and inconsistencies all over the place and characters just doing stuff. And the fact that like Ryan Condal has weaved it into semi-coherent narrative that like that is interesting week to week, that everyone wants to watch, that has, that people are really invested in. It's just like bravo to the writing staff, bravo to the whole team.
I also think this is his first major production, I think.
Yeah. I mean, look, I had really low expectations going in, but it's still, they greatly exceeded my expectations. The show is not perfect by any means, but the source material is less than perfect, and it's much, much better than the source material. Game of Thrones first season is fantastic. It's arguable whether or not it's on par with George's actual book, A Game of Thrones, which is an incredible book. But that was also a really, really tough task, and so I'm not one of these people that bashes these like there are all sorts of videos where they're just like, Dan and Dave, idiots, Dumb and Dumber, like. Yeah, there are things they do that are fucked up, and people mess up and people do things wrong here and there. But then they have greatness too. We're all complicated people that can.
Those types of videos are such like low hanging fruit.
Yeah, and even we have like in our past have like ripped on D&D at times, but
it's not excessive.
No, it's not. Yeah, we haven't done it excessively. It's and these are very talented people that are doing incredibly difficult jobs, and sometimes they catch the lightning in the bottle, and sometimes they fail to catch the lightning in the bottle. But it's they're still creating something that's pretty interesting. So
at least it wasn't Rings of Power mediocre. This is a pretty good show. At least it wasn't Rings of Power.
But even Rings of Power, if I'm really looking at it and I'm like, wow, that like. All the successes of Rings of Power on how it looks and how beautiful it is, like that's pretty impressive that they put that all together. So there are some things where I'm just in awe that I mean, did I ever think in my lifetime I would see like an adaptation of a prequel to Lord of the Rings? No. When you told me about it years ago, I was like, what? They're going to redo the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Like, it was just so unthinkable that they would do anything else, Oh, it's a prequel.
Technically, we did get a prequel to Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit.
Yeah. But, like, I mean, yeah.
The real prequel.
The real prequel.
But, Preston, do you mind if we wrap it up here?
Sure thing.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.